The snow tube hill in my backyard had been the neighborhood's favorite winter attraction for 3 years before Patricia Henderson decided it violated HOA regulations that nobody knew existed. I'm Kevin Tenley, and I had just finished packing down the snow on my half-acre slope behind my house in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, when Patricia appeared at my fence line that January morning. She wore a cream-colored parka that probably cost more than my snow grooming equipment, and carried a leather portfolio like she was heading into a boardroom instead of trudging through 8 inches of fresh powder. "Mr. Tenley, I need to speak with you immediately," she called out, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I shut off the snowmobile and pulled off my helmet. "Morning, Patricia. What's going on, this hill of yours? It needs to stop." She gestured at my perfectly groomed sledding run like it was a pile of garbage. "The HOA board held an emergency meeting last night, and we've determined that your snow tubing operation is in violation of Section 12, subsection 4 of our community guidelines." I climbed off the snowmobile and walked over to the fence. "What operation? Kids come over and sled down my hill. That's it. I've been doing this since I moved in 5 years ago." Patricia opened her portfolio and pulled out a document. "You're running an unauthorized recreational facility that creates excessive noise, increases traffic in our residential area, and poses liability issues for the entire community. We're issuing you a formal cease and desist order, effective immediately." "You've got to be kidding me. Every house on this street has kids who use this hill. Your own grandson was here last weekend." Her face reddened slightly. "That's irrelevant. The rules are the rules, Mr. Tenley. The hill must be closed by this weekend, or we'll be forced to issue fines starting at $500 per day." I took the document she thrust through the fence slats. The paper was still warm from her printer, the ink so fresh I could smell it. This wasn't some long-standing rule I'd violated. This was brand new, rushed through specifically to target me. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" Patricia straightened her already perfect posture. "The board has become aware of safety concerns. If a child were to be injured on your property, it could impact all of our home values and insurance premiums. We're simply protecting the community's interests." "The community's interests? I've got 20 families who bring their kids here every weekend. I've never charged anyone a dime. This is just neighbors helping neighbors have fun in the winter. Nevertheless, the decision has been made. Good day, Mr. Tenley." She turned and marched back toward her house 3 doors down, leaving perfect footprints in the pristine snow. I looked down at the cease and desist order, then back at my hill. I'd spent years managing this slope, removing rocks, evening out the grade, planting grass that could handle the wear. Every autumn I'd prepare it for winter. Every spring I'd repair any damage. It wasn't just a hill. It was a labor of love that brought the whole neighborhood together. My phone buzzed. It was Derek Morrison from 2 streets over. "Dude, did Patricia just shut down the hill?" he asked. "How did you know?" "She's posting about it in the neighborhood Facebook group. Says you were running an illegal business and endangering children. It's blowing up right now." I hung up and checked Facebook. Sure enough, Patricia had written a long post about reckless homeowners who prioritize their own entertainment over community safety. The comments were mixed. Some parents were thanking her for protecting our children, while others were calling her out for overreach. The thread already had over 100 comments and kept growing. I went inside and sat at my kitchen table, reading through the actual HOA documents. Section 12. Subsection 4 had been amended just 6 days ago in what Patricia called an emergency revision session. Only 3 board members had attended: Patricia as president, her friend Linda as vice president, and Tom Garrett as treasurer. The bylaws required 4 board members for a quorum, but apparently they'd pushed it through anyway. My wife Sarah came in from her home office. "What's wrong? You look furious." I explained the situation. Sarah had always been the calmer one between us, the voice of reason. She read through the documents carefully while I paced the kitchen. "This isn't legal," she finally said. "They didn't have a proper quorum, and they didn't give the required 30-day notice before implementing a new rule. This whole thing is invalid. Tell that to Patricia. She's ready to fine me $500 a day." Sarah set down the papers. "Then we need to go to the next full board meeting and challenge this. In the meantime, you should probably close the hill. I know it sucks, but if they do fine us, we'd have to pay while fighting it in court." I hated that she was right. The next board meeting wasn't for 3 weeks. I sent out messages to all the families who regularly used the hill, explaining the situation. The responses ranged from disappointed to outraged. Several parents said they'd come to the board meeting to support me. That weekend was torture. The weather was perfect, crisp, cold, with 6 inches of fresh powder. My hill sat empty while I watched kids from my window being driven to the overcrowded public sledding area 20 minutes away. That hill charged $15 per person and had wait times of over an hour. Monday morning, I received a formal letter from the HOA's lawyer. Not only did they confirm the cease and desist, but they also demanded I remove all snow grooming equipment from visibility, as it constituted unsightly commercial equipment. My snowmobile had to be garaged, my rope tow taken down, and even the little warming fire pit I'd set up had to go. I called my own lawyer, Robert Chen, who I'd used when buying the house. He reviewed the documents and confirmed what Sarah had found. "This is definitely improper procedure," Robert said over the phone. "But here's the thing, Kevin. Fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. Even when you're right, you can rack up thousands in legal fees. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared to not let Patricia Henderson bully me into giving up something that brings joy to dozens of kids." "All right. Let me draft a response challenging the validity of their rule change. In the meantime, document everything. Every communication, every post, every interaction. If this goes to court, we'll need it all." The next 3 weeks crawled by. Patricia's posting campaign intensified. She'd found a picture from the previous winter of my nephew falling off a tube mid-ride, laughing and covered in snow. She posted it with the caption, "This is what Kevin Tenley thinks is safe family fun." The fact that my nephew was completely fine and had immediately climbed back up for another run didn't matter to her narrative. I started documenting everything, like Robert suggested. I filed a formal complaint about the improper board procedures. I collected statements from families who used the hill. I even got proof that Patricia's own family had used it multiple times, including photos from the neighborhood Facebook group that other parents had posted. The board meeting finally arrived on a Thursday evening in February. The community center room that normally held maybe 15 people was packed with at least 60. Parents I'd never even met had shown up after hearing about the situation. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the turnout. She gavelled the meeting to start and immediately tried to move past my agenda item. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I filed a formal complaint 3 weeks ago. That's supposed to be addressed tonight." Patricia barely looked at me. "We'll get to it if time permits. We have several other important matters to discuss first." A father named James stood up. "No, we're discussing this now. You shut down something the entire neighborhood uses. You don't get to just skip it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Patricia's face flushed, but she nodded stiffly. "Fine. "Mr. Tenley, you have 5 minutes. I need more than 5 minutes to explain why your rule change was illegal." "Illegal?" Linda, the vice president, laughed. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" I walked to the front and handed out copies of my research to each board member. "You didn't have a quorum when you passed this rule. You only had 3 members present, and the bylaws require 4. You also didn't provide the required 30-day notice period before implementation. And you specifically targeted my property without addressing any other similar situations in the neighborhood. Greg Morrison has a skateboard ramp in his yard that kids from all over use. The Johnsons have a basketball court that runs pickup games every weekend. But somehow only my hill is a problem." Tom Garrett, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably. "We were responding to safety concerns." "What safety concerns? Has anyone been injured? Has anyone complained? I've got statements from over 30 families here saying they support the hill and have never felt it was unsafe." Patricia cut in. "One complaint is enough if it raises valid concerns. Who complained? That's confidential." "Of course it is," I said, "because there was no complaint, was there? You just decided you didn't like what I was doing and made up a rule to stop it." The crowd erupted in agreement. Parents started calling out their own support for the hill. Patricia tried to gavel people back to order, but the room was too heated. Finally, she stood up. "Fine. You want to know who complained? I did. I'm a homeowner too, and I have every right to raise concerns about activities that affect my property value and my peace of mind. Every weekend, I have to deal with cars parking on the street, noise from children screaming, and the knowledge that we're one lawsuit away from our insurance premiums skyrocketing." "Your house is 3 doors down," I said. "You can't even see my hill from your property. And you never mentioned any of this until last month." "What really changed, Patricia?" She sat back down, her jaw tight. "This discussion is over. The board will review your complaint and issue a decision within 10 business days." "That's not how this works," Robert Chen said, standing up from where he'd been sitting in the back. "You don't get to unilaterally decide when discussions end, Mrs. Henderson. And since the rule was improperly implemented, my client has grounds to ignore it entirely. If you attempt to levy fines against him, we'll see you in court for harassment and improper board governance." Patricia's eyes went wide. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm explaining the legal reality. You overstepped your authority. Fix it or face the consequences." The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Several other homeowners started raising complaints about Patricia's leadership. Apparently, my situation wasn't isolated. She'd been pushing through various restrictions and fines over the past year, always with the same 3-person partial board, always without proper notice. We left the meeting with no resolution, but with a lot more community support than I'd expected. Robert told me to reopen the hill while we waited for their decision. "Make them take you to court if they want to stop you," he said. "They won't, because they know they'll lose." That Saturday, I fired up the snowmobile and started grooming the hill again. Within an hour, families started showing up. Kids were sledding and tubing while parents stood around the fire pit drinking hot chocolate and coffee. It felt like a small victory. Sunday morning, I found a notice taped to my door. $500 fine for operating the hill. Another $500 fine for having commercial equipment visible from the street. $1,000 total, due in 15 days. I photographed the notice and sent it to Robert. He filed an emergency injunction that afternoon, arguing that the HOA was retaliating against me for challenging their authority. The hearing was set for the following Friday. In the meantime, Patricia ramped up her campaign. She started emailing every homeowner in the development, warning them that using my hill could make them accessories to violations of community guidelines. She posted daily updates about my continued defiance on Facebook. She even called the county to see if I needed permits for my hill, which I didn't. The Friday hearing was in front of Judge Maria Rodriguez at the Routt County Courthouse. Robert presented our case, highlighting all the procedural violations and the HOA's retaliatory behavior. Patricia's lawyer, a guy named Philip Brennan who looked like he wished he was anywhere else, tried to argue that the board had acted within its discretionary authority. Judge Rodriguez wasn't buying it. "Mr. Brennan, your clients failed to follow their own bylaws when implementing this rule. They didn't have a quorum, they didn't provide proper notice, and based on the evidence presented, they appear to be selectively enforcing rules against Mr. Tenley while ignoring similar situations throughout the community. The injunction is granted. The HOA is prohibited from enforcing any fines or restrictions against Mr. Tenley's property until this matter is properly resolved through legitimate board procedures." Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. As we left the courthouse, she blocked my path. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You think you've won, but you don't understand how this works. I will make your life in this community miserable until you comply." "Is that a threat?" Robert asked, pulling out his phone. "Because I'm happy to document it and add it to our harassment claim." Patricia stormed off to her car. I should have felt victorious, but instead, I just felt tired. This had already consumed weeks of my life and several $1,000s in legal fees. Even winning felt like losing. March arrived with warmer temperatures. The sledding season was effectively over, which meant the immediate conflict was resolved by nature. But I knew this wasn't finished. Patricia wasn't the type to let things go. I was right. In April, I received notice that the HOA was implementing new landscaping requirements. Every property had to maintain natural, Colorado-appropriate vegetation and remove any artificial modifications to natural topography. The rule was clearly aimed at my hill again, since I'd spent years grading and leveling it for optimal sledding. But this time, Patricia had been smarter. The rule had been properly noticed. A full board meeting had been held with all 7 members present. Public comment had been allowed. They dotted every I and crossed every T. Robert reviewed the new rule. "This is legal," he said. "I mean, it's still targeting you, but they did it right this time. You could argue selective enforcement again, but that's harder to prove with a rule that applies to everyone. So what are my options? Comply or fight it in court knowing you'll probably lose." HOAs have broad authority over aesthetic issues. If they want natural landscaping, they can generally require it. I spent a week stewing over it. Sarah suggested we just let it go, that fighting Patricia wasn't worth the stress. But something about giving in bothered me on a fundamental level. This was my property. I'd bought it, I paid for it, I maintained it. Having some busybody neighbor dictate what I could do with my own land felt fundamentally wrong. Then I had an idea. If Patricia wanted natural landscaping and natural topography, I'd give her exactly that. But I'd do it in a way that preserved what made my property special, while technically complying with her stupid rule. I called a landscaping company that specialized in natural Colorado environments. A guy named Marcus came out to assess the property. I explained what I wanted. Convert the sledding hill into a natural meadow landscape that followed the existing grade and topography, using native grasses and wildflowers that would stabilize the slope. The hill would remain. It was the natural topography of my land, after all. I'd just be enhancing it with appropriate vegetation. "So you want to keep the slope, but make it look natural?" Marcus asked. "Exactly. and I want it to be the most beautiful, perfectly executed natural landscape in the entire development. Native grasses, wildflowers, maybe some naturalized stone features. Something that clearly shows this isn't just compliance, it's an improvement. Marcus grinned. I like the way you think. Let me draw up some plans. The design he came back with was stunning. Native buffalo grass and blue grama would cover most of the slope, mixed with wildflower seed for spring and summer blooms. Strategic placements of Colorado flagstone would create natural-looking outcroppings and borders. A few carefully selected native shrubs and small trees would provide visual interest without disrupting the sightlines. The hill would remain at its current grade, which was, after all, the natural topography before I'd enhanced it for sledding. I'd just be removing the wear patterns and replacing them with vegetation. The cost was $15,000, way more than I wanted to spend out of spite, but Sarah surprised me by supporting it. If we're going to do this, let's do it right, she said. Make it so beautiful that Patricia can't say a word without looking petty. Work began in May. Marcus brought in his crew, and they started by treating the compacted soil and preparing it for new growth. They installed an irrigation system that would establish the grasses, then could be scaled back once everything was established. The flagstone was placed to look like natural rock outcroppings that had always been there. Native wildflower seeds went in columbine, lupine, Indian paintbrush, blanket flower, and wild iris. The transformation took 6 weeks. By mid-June, my former sledding hill had become a stunning natural meadow that looked like something out of a Colorado tourism brochure. The slope remained exactly as it had been, perfect for sledding once winter returned and the grass went dormant under snow. But now, it was covered in native vegetation that would thrive through the summer months. I submitted photos and documentation to the HOA, demonstrating my full compliance with the new landscaping requirements. I'd used only native species. I'd maintained the natural topography. I'd even improved water management and erosion control with the new vegetation. Patricia came by 3 days later. I was watering the new plants when she appeared at the fence line. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, complying with the HOA's landscaping requirements. All native Colorado vegetation, natural topography maintained. Marcus gave me full documentation of every plant species used. Everything's approved for this elevation and climate zone. She stared at the meadow, clearly trying to find something to object to. "This is still just your sledding hill with grass on it." "No, this is the natural topography of my property enhanced with native vegetation, exactly as your rule requires. The slope exists naturally. I've just improved it with appropriate landscaping. In fact, I'm pretty sure my property now has the best example of natural Colorado landscaping in the entire development. Maybe I should win an award." Her face went red. "You think you're very clever, don't you?" "I think I'm compliant with HOA regulations while maintaining my property in a way that makes me happy. Isn't that what we all want?" She couldn't argue, because I was right. I'd followed her stupid rule to the letter while completely undermining its intent, and the meadow was genuinely beautiful. Several neighbors had already stopped by to compliment it and ask for Marcus's contact information. But I knew Patricia wouldn't let this rest. 2 weeks later, she called an emergency board meeting to discuss disguised recreational facilities masquerading as landscaping. I wasn't officially notified of the meeting, but Tom Garrett, the treasurer, gave me a heads up. He was getting tired of Patricia's vendetta. "She's pushing to pass a rule that would prohibit any landscaping designed to facilitate recreational activities," Tom told me over the phone. "She specifically wants to ban any maintained slope greater than 15 degrees. That's insane. Half the properties in this development have natural slopes steeper than that. You'd be requiring people to terrace their yards. I know. That's why I'm telling you, come to the meeting. Bring neighbors. This has gone too far. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening. I spread the word, and once again, the community center was packed. This time, homeowners weren't just there to support me. They were there because Patricia's new proposal would affect dozens of properties. Greg Morrison stood up during the open comment period. My backyard has a natural 20-degree slope down to the creek. Are you telling me I have to terrace it? The rule would include exceptions for unmaintained natural slopes, Patricia said. Define unmaintained, Greg shot back. I mow my lawn. Does that make it maintained? Linda, the vice president, looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should table this discussion until we can clarify the language. But Patricia pushed forward. We need to address properties that are being maintained specifically for recreational use. That's the issue here. No, the issue is that you've decided you don't like what Kevin does with his property, and you're trying to use the HOA to force him to stop, called out a woman named Jennifer. And now you're proposing rules that would negatively impact all of us just to target one person. That's not leadership. That's a personal grudge. The meeting erupted in arguments. Board members started arguing with each other. Tom and two other board members publicly stated they wouldn't support Patricia's proposal. The whole thing was a disaster for her. At the end of the meeting, no new rule was passed. Instead, 3 board members submitted their resignations, effective immediately. They cited Patricia's inability to lead objectively and her personal vendettas as reasons for stepping down. With only 4 board members remaining, they couldn't reach a quorum to pass any new rules. An emergency election was called for July. Nominations were opened up, and to my surprise, several people encouraged me to run. I declined, but Sarah decided to run. So did Greg Morrison and Jennifer Hollies, the woman who'd called out Patricia at the meeting. The campaign was brief but intense. Patricia and Linda ran as a slate promising strong leadership and community standards. Sarah, Greg, and Jennifer ran on a platform of common-sense governance and ending personal vendettas. 3 other community members ran as well, making it a crowded field for 3 open positions. During this time, my meadow continued to flourish. The wildflowers had bloomed into a spectacular display of color. Butterflies and bees were everywhere. Several professional photographers asked permission to shoot there. A local garden club asked if they could include it on their summer tour. My Spite project had accidentally become one of the most beautiful yards in Steamboat Springs. Patricia filed a complaint with the county about my irrigation system, claiming it violated water use restrictions. The county inspector came out, looked at my system, and told me I was well within regulations. He actually complimented the native plant choices and suggested I reduce watering as the plants established. She filed a noise complaint about my lawnmower. The police came out, measured the decibel level, and found it was below the noise ordinance threshold. The officer who responded recognized my address from previous calls and told me off the record that Patricia had been calling about various properties in the neighborhood, always with minor complaints that went nowhere. She's making a nuisance of herself at the department, he said. Just wanted you to know you're not alone in dealing with this. The HOA election took place on a sweltering evening in July. Nearly every household in the development voted, a record turnout. The results weren't even close. Sarah, Greg, and Jennifer won by significant margins. Patricia and Linda finished 4th and 5th, not even close to winning seats. Patricia showed up to the first new board meeting in August looking like she'd aged 5 years. Her reign as HOA president was over. Sarah was elected as the new president by unanimous vote of the board members. One of their first actions was to rescind several of Patricia's questionable rule changes, including the one that had banned my sledding hill. The hill was officially allowed to operate again come winter, though I'd need to post signs about using it at your own risk and maybe get liability insurance. Just basic common sense safety stuff, Sarah explained at dinner after the meeting. Nothing that will stop you from doing it, just protecting us legally. I thought that would be the end of it. Patricia had been defeated, her rules overturned, and a new board was in place, but Patricia wasn't done yet. In September, I noticed someone had been walking through my property at night. I found footprints in the soft soil near the irrigation controls. Then my timer settings were changed, causing the system to run during the heat of the day instead of early morning, wasting water and stressing the plants. I installed security cameras. 2 days later, they caught Patricia entering my yard at 11 p.m. and dumping something on my meadow. I couldn't see what it was in the dark footage, but the next morning, I found patches of my wildflowers dying. I called the police. They came out and tested the dead areas, concentrated herbicide. Someone had deliberately poisoned sections of my landscaping. Officer Mike Stevens took my statement and reviewed the camera footage. That's pretty clearly Patricia Henderson. Do you want to press charges? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to let it go to be the bigger person. But she'd crossed a line. This wasn't HOA politics anymore. This was criminal destruction of property. Yes, press charges. Patricia was arrested the following day for criminal mischief and trespassing. The police found a half-empty container of concentrated herbicide in her garage that matched what had been used on my property. She tried to claim she'd used it on her own weeds, but the footage from my camera was damning. The arrest became neighborhood gossip within hours. Patricia's husband, Richard, came to my door that evening looking exhausted and embarrassed. "I don't know what to say except I'm sorry," he said. "Patricia has become obsessed with this situation. I've tried to talk to her, but she won't listen. She's convinced you're somehow destroying the neighborhood. I just wanted to let kids sled down a hill, Richard. I know that. Everyone knows that except her." He pulled out his checkbook. "How much is the damage? I'll cover the repairs." I showed him the dead patches. Marcus estimated about $3,000 to remove the damaged plants and soil, treat the area, and replant. Richard wrote me a check for $5,000 without blinking. "The extra is for your trouble and legal fees," he said. "This shouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry." Patricia ended up pleading guilty to criminal mischief as part of a plea deal. She received probation, community service, and was required to pay restitution for my property damage. The judge also issued a restraining order requiring her to stay at least 100 feet away from my property. Richard quietly filed for divorce 2 months later. The neighborhood gossip said he'd had enough of Patricia's obsessive behavior and controlling nature. They sold their house in October and both moved out of the development. Winter came early that year. By November, we had a solid base of snow. The wildflowers and grasses on my hill went dormant under the white blanket, and the slope was ready for sledding once again. I spent a Saturday morning grooming the hill, packing down the snow and setting up the rope tow. By noon, families started arriving. Kids bundled in winter gear squealed with delight as they slid down the slope. Parents stood around the fire pit drinking hot cocoa and catching up. Tom Garrett, the former treasurer who'd given me that crucial heads-up about Patricia's meeting, came over with his kids. "Feels good to have this back," he said, watching his daughter race down the hill on a tube. "It really does. You know, you could have just given in, would have been easier." "Maybe. But then what? give in to the next unreasonable demand, and the one after that. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it costs you. Tom nodded. For what it's worth, I think a lot of people learned something from watching you handle this. Patricia ran this HOA like her personal fiefdom for years, and people just accepted it because fighting back seemed too hard. You showed everyone that it doesn't have to be that way. Sarah came over and handed us fresh cups of coffee. As the new HOA president, she'd been working to reform how the board operated. Open meetings, better communication, rules that actually made sense and applied fairly to everyone. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, watching the kids play. "We should make this official. Create a community winter recreation area with proper liability waivers and maybe basic oversight. That way other families could do something similar if they wanted. Make it a neighborhood amenity instead of just your thing." "I like that idea," I said, "though I don't know if anyone else has a hill like this. Maybe not for sledding, but there are other possibilities. Greg wants to formalize his skateboard park. The Johnsons want to organize proper basketball leagues on their court. If we create a framework that makes these kinds of things officially sanctioned by the HOA, it protects everyone and keeps another Patricia from shutting it all down." It made sense. Over the next few months, the HOA board developed new guidelines for homeowner-maintained community recreation areas. Properties that met basic safety requirements and carried appropriate insurance could register their amenities with the HOA and open them for neighborhood use. In exchange, they got liability protection and official community support. My Hill was the first property registered under the new system. By spring, 3 other properties had joined the program, including a nature trail that the Hendersons had developed through their wooded lot, and a community garden that the retired couple on Maple Street had been maintaining for years. The meadow on my hill bloomed again that second summer, even more spectacular than the first year as the plants fully established themselves. I won the HOA's inaugural Community Beautification Award, which came with a hand-carved sign that Sarah presented at a neighborhood barbecue. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the full story. I saw Patricia one more time by accident at a grocery store in town. She was alone, looked smaller somehow, diminished. Our eyes met across the produce section. For a moment I thought about saying something, maybe offering some kind of olive branch, but she turned away quickly and disappeared down another aisle. Later, I heard she'd moved to Denver and was living in a condo. No HOA to run, no neighborhood to control. I hoped she'd found some peace, though I doubted it. People like Patricia usually just find new targets for their need to dominate. The restraining order expired after 2 years, but she never came back to Steamboat Springs as far as I knew. Richard remarried and seemed genuinely happy with his new wife, a laid-back ski instructor who thought the whole HOA drama was hilarious. My hill continued to be the neighborhood gathering place every winter. We added lights one year so people could sled into the evening. Another year, we built a better warming hut with a proper fire pit and seating. It became tradition for the neighborhood kids to help me groom the hill on the first big snow of the season. The legal fees and landscaping costs had been significant, probably close to $25,000 when everything was added up. But watching kids laugh and play on that hill, seeing neighbors gather and connect, knowing I'd stood up to someone who tried to use petty power to control others, it felt worth it. Sarah sometimes teased me about my expensive grudge, but she got it. Some things matter more than money or convenience. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it would be easier to give in. 3 years after the whole mess started, I was out grooming the hill early one Saturday morning when a young couple pulled up. They introduced themselves as potential buyers for one of the houses down the street. The realtor told us about the sledding hill, the woman said. She said it's one of the neighborhood's best features. We've got 2 kids, and the idea of having something like this in walking distance is amazing. Just doing my part, I said. We heard there was some controversy about it a few years ago, something with the HOA that got resolved. New board, new policies. The hill isn't going anywhere. They bought the house. Their kids became regulars on the hill. The neighborhood continued to grow and change. New families moving in, older residents moving on. But the hill remained constant, a place where community happened naturally, without anyone trying to control or manage it into existence. The native wildflower meadow became a local landmark. Garden clubs requested tours. A regional landscaping magazine did a feature on it. Marcus, the landscaper, got so much business from people wanting similar designs that he had to hire additional staff. My spiteful compliance with Patricia's rule had accidentally started a trend toward more natural landscaping throughout Steamboat Springs. I never set out to be some kind of neighborhood hero, or to change HOA governance, or to influence local landscaping trends. I just wanted to let kids sled down a hill in my backyard without some busybody telling me I couldn't. But sometimes standing up to unreasonable authority creates ripples that spread farther than you expect. Sarah's HOA reforms became a model that other developments in the area studied and copied. The idea that an HOA should facilitate community rather than restrict, it seemed obvious in hindsight. But it had taken Patricia's overreach and the community's pushback to make it happen. On winter evenings, I'd stand at my kitchen window and watch the hill lit up with activity. Colored lights we'd strung up made it look magical. Kids in bright snow gear zipped down the slope while parents socialized around the fire. It looked like a scene from a Christmas card, this perfect slice of community life. It was exactly what I'd envisioned when I first moved to this property and saw that perfect slope in my backyard. Patricia had tried to take it away out of spite and control. Instead, her opposition had made it stronger, more official, more permanent. She'd wanted to shut down a simple neighborhood tradition, and instead had helped create an institution. There's probably a lesson in there about the futility of trying to control people, about how authoritarian impulses usually backfire, about the importance of community and connection over rules and restrictions. But mostly I just think about how glad I am that I didn't give in, didn't give up, didn't let Patricia Henderson turn my property into whatever sterile vision she had in her head. The hill stands as a testament to the simple idea that people should be free to enjoy their property in ways that bring joy to themselves and their neighbors, as long as they're not actually hurting anyone. It's not a complicated philosophy, but it's one worth defending. And every winter, when that first big snow falls and I fire up the snowmobile to groom the runs, when I see kids already gathering with their sleds and tubes before I'm even finished, when I hear the laughter and excitement echoing across the snow, that's when I know it was all worth it. Patricia tried to ban my snow tube hill. Instead, I graded it into natural landscaping that made it permanent, beautiful, and untouchable. Some victories are worth fighting for, no matter how petty they might seem. This was one of them. The hill is still there, still hosting neighborhood kids every winter, still blooming with wildflowers every summer. It will probably outlast me, maintained by whoever owns this property next, carrying on the tradition of community and joy that no HOA board could ever truly regulate away. And somewhere in Denver, Patricia presumably fumes about it, or maybe she's moved on to trying to control some other poor person's life. Either way, she lost this fight. The hill won. Community won. Common sense won. That's good enough for me.